I'm Maria Barontini, Pastoral Associate of Children's Catechesis at Prince of Peace. This week, the readings for Sunday, July 26, are 1 Kings, chapter 3, verse 5, and then verse 7 through 12, Psalms 119, Romans 8, verse 28 through 30, and Matthew 13, verses 44 through 52. Remember, we talked about parables for the last 2 weeks, but I'm going to make sure we all understand what a parable is. We learned that a parable is a way Jesus taught people. It's a short story that teaches us something that we need to reflect on to understand it. Parables sketch out earthly scenarios that reveal heavenly mysteries. Make sure you read the readings before Mass to better prepare yourself for Mass. The Gospel reading is Matthew 13, 44 through 52. We hear several different parables here. They're short, and you might blip and you miss it, but there are several in this story. The first two are the parable of the hidden treasure, which is in Matthew 13, verse 44, so the very first verse we hear, and then the parable of great value, which is verses 45 through 46, so they immediately follow one another. They both illustrate the exact same point. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the same book that I showed last week, which is the Illustrated Parables of Jesus for Children, which is produced by Ignatius Press and the Magnificat. So I'm going to show you this first, and this is a good way for us to just summarize what's happened in the story quickly. Sorry, I lost my page. There we go. The treasure and the pearl. Sorry. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. A man finds the treasure. He quickly hides it again. He joyfully goes to sell all that he owns and buys the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl of great value. A merchant sees this pearl. He goes to sell all he has, and he buys the pearl. Well, what does this mean? Well, they both stress that the kingdom's value is infinite. That means that heaven's value is never ending. It never ends. It's so great a value, you can never find the end of the value. And surrendering earthly attachments, so the things we're attached to in the earth, so that means like our house, our possessions, our whatever we own, what we have, is required to obtain heaven. That means that for us to follow Christ, we may need to give up something we treasure so we can build treasure in heaven for heaven. The person who finds the treasure and the merchant who finds the pearl sell all that they have to acquire what they have found. They realize that there is value in the kingdom and that sacrifices are worth making to obtain heaven. These individuals give up all of these things with great joy to obtain the treasure they seek. They're happy to give it up because they know that the treasure that they will eventually get is worth it. And that's how we have to look at heaven. Sometimes we may need to give up some things to obtain heaven. We may need to make some people angry. We may need to be on opposing sides on something because our goal is ultimately heaven. We need to remember that our goal is heaven, and sometimes we have to give up things to get there. The next parable that is talked about in Matthew 13, verse 44 through 52, is the parable of the net. It is also called the parable of the dragnet. This tells the story of what it's telling us in this parable is it envisions the day of judgment when the righteous are separated from the wicked. The net is dragged out out and it catches all these fish. But not all the fish are good, and some are thrown away. What Jesus is telling us is that's the same is true for people. Not all are good, and there will be a judgment at the end of time. This parable is very similar to the parable of the good seed and the weeds that we heard last week. So you may want to go back and read all of these parables together so you can have a better understanding of what Jesus is telling us about the kingdom of heaven. So make sure you read these verses before you get to Mass, and I look forward to talking to you again in a few weeks. Bye.